So, well, hello, welcome back. This is Dr. Wanda Davis coming to you again to review the activity 1.1.2, variable and data types in Computer Science A through Project Lead the Way. So let's get started. So the goals are learn to use variables so that the same algorithm runs using different input values. Determine the appropriate use for specific variables and data types. Okay, so variables, let's talk about that. When creating a program, you may find it necessary to store certain values so you can process or use those values later. For this, you create variables. A variable is a container that holds information while your program runs. All variables use memory locations to hold their values. So in Java, there are three things must be defined to create and store a value: the type of the variable, the identifier or name of the variable, the value of the variable. So on number 1, it says, examine the following code. Can you guess what it does? So it looks like this code. Okay, so it's asking, can we determine what this program does? So we know that the file name is first variable.java. The class should be the same as the file name. The method is public static void, main method. The int age, so on line 5, the name is age. The type of data the variable can hold is called an integer. So it's going to hold an integer. The value is 12. Okay. So the variable named age has a value of 12. All right, and that's why it's written out as int age 12. Okay. So the value initially assigned to the variable is 12. To use Java, actually we can go in and see what it does. Let's run it. So it says the value of age is 12, and that's what it does. Wherever is system.out.print, remember whatever is in red is what it's going to print out. This above is just detailing what we're calling for. We're calling for the age, and we double the allowance equals 5.25, and the Boolean is old enough equals true. So right now we're calling for the age. To use Java terminology, you would say this is a variable named age that is of type int and contains the value of 12. Because a variable age is created and set equal to a value on the same line, you can say that age was declared and initialized. So because these are on the same line, that means that age has been declared and initialized, okay? And we'll get deeper into that as we go along. So on line 6 and 7, so it goes through and it talks about each line. On line 6 and 7, 2 other variables are declared and initialized. And it says, how would you describe it? So the first variable is the double allowance, and we're going to look here. So the allowance variable is declared as type double, and its value is initialized to 5.25. The is old enough variable is declared as type Boolean, and its value is initialized to true. And that's what it's stating here on line 6. The variable is a double, and the value is 5.25. So it has been initialized because it's all on the same line. The variable is a Boolean. It's initialized to true. I'm sorry, the variable is allowance, and its declared type is a double. So the variable is allowance, the declared type is double, and initialized to 5.25. Then up here the variable is old enough, declared as a Boolean, and it's initialized to true. I have to correct myself. So it says here you can also declare variables without initializing them. For example, you could declare the variable age as integer in one line and then set the initial value to 12 in a separate statement. So the int age is in one line and then they are declaring it on a separate line with the value of 12. Okay. Add print statements to system to display the two other variables that have been declared. So these are the two other variables that have been declared, and we need to add print statements. So here we could do a system.out.print, as they've done here, system.out.print, open parentheses, and then we can say int age, and then system.out.print, and then we can say age. Okay, so right here it says add print statements to display the two other variables that have been declared and initialized. So the two other variables, so it has a system.out.print, a value of age is 12, and these are the two other variables, so we need to go system.out.print and say something like the allowance, the value of age is, can we say the value of allowance? Is, and then we're going to say system.out.print line, and this has to be allowance, like that. And make sure you put your semicolons at the end. Okay, and so these two lines will reference these two lines. Okay, system.out.print, the value of allowance is 5.25, system.out.print. Then we need to do one for the Boolean. So we go system.out.print, the value of is old enough. And then we need to say system.out.print. And then we need to say is old enough. So okay, so we have input our two additional lines for double, allowance, and Boolean. These two lines are for the double allowance, and then these two lines here are for is old enough. So let's run it and see what happens. It's saying I have this should be LN, is old enough. Java error 13, actually I'm missing a semicolon also here. So as you can see, it says error on line 13. It says it's expecting a semicolon, which I did not include, so you need to put that in there. Now I'm going to run it again. There it is. The value of age is 12. The value of allowance is 5.25. The value of is old enough is true. The value of is old enough is true. Okay, so let's talk about data types. There's different type of data types in Java. We have primitive types, ints, double, boolean. Primitive types are basic data types. So they're available within the Java language. There are eight primitive types. There is a boolean, byte, character, short, int, long, float, and double. And then we will go over those. Okay. Integer, int means integer. Double means a primitive type that stores decimal numbers. So it stores decimal numbers. The int, and then the boolean stores true or false values. So the double stores decimal numbers, the int stores true or false values, and the integer stores integers, which are just basic numbers, okay, without decimals. So it says in here, boolean is a primitive data type that stores the values true or false. Int is a primitive data type that stores integers, which are whole numbers. And a double is a primitive data type that stores decimal numbers. So when a program runs, each variable is assigned a block of memory to store its value. In other words, the value of an int, which is a whole number again, double, which is a decimal number, and boolean, which results in true or false. Variable is stored in a specific memory location. And you're going to learn about these data types later. So for now, we're just going to focus on specific type of data and its memory location, which is an int. And remember, that's a whole number and can only store an integer. A double only stores decimal values. And a boolean data type only stores true or false. You can go over this yourself, play with that yourself. Naming variables. Okay, so we're going to talk about naming variables. So when we name variables, it's important to give it a name that you can remember, a name that is used for its intended purpose, and so that it's easy to find by programmers. So if you use 2 words in a variable name, you would have to use the camel case, which means that if the words were Wanda Davis, the W in Wanda is lowercase, and then the D in Davis is capitalized, and both names are all one word. Merged, that's all one word. So therefore, all classes should be named using upper camel case, while methods and variables should have lower camel case names. So this is an example of an upper camel case name, is old enough. And then Java has strict rules for naming variables. A variable cannot begin with a number. A variable cannot contain any special characters. And a variable cannot have the same name as a Java keyword. So if you have a variable that is old enough, it cannot begin with the 1 at the beginning of is old enough. It cannot begin with an asterisk or a pound sign. Or it cannot contain an asterisk or a pound sign within the name. And you cannot use a keyword that Java has already established as one of your camel case convention names. Sometimes you may need a variable to stay the same throughout the code. That's where using and reusing variables come into play. You can reassign a value of a variable at any time in the code, at any point in time in the code, as long as the new value is the same type. So it has to be the same type as age. So in other words, you see they assign these are 2 different values. However, you can assign different values as long as the type, which is age, is the same. Okay, and then moving on down, sometimes you cannot change a variable and that is if you declare it, if you have a final variable. So when a variable is declared final, its value cannot be changed. So for example, if you declare it final here, and then you say double allowance, this value can never be changed. Okay, so I am back. So now it's your turn. Gina's household has rules for who is allowed to receive allowance. Gina has 2 siblings, Carl and Jennifer. Print out information about each sibling as to whether they will be receiving an allowance. Use the following information as a guide. So here's the guide. Allowance is always 8.75. So the always means that it's going to be a final. So we can say final, and because this is an integer, we're going to say final double allowance equals 875. Then it says children under 8 do not receive an allowance. So Gina is 16 years old, so she will receive an allowance. So we can say int equals 16. Carl is 3 years younger than Gina, so that makes Carl 13, and he will receive an allowance. Jennifer was born 10 years after Carl, so that makes Jennifer 3 years old. So it says here, examine the code below and modify the variables so the output displays Carl's and Jennifer's information after Gina's. So it's going to display Carl's and Jennifer's information after Gina's. So I actually did it, but we can do it together. Let's run it and make sure it's no errors. And I have an error, Java 5 error, so on line 5, 3.75. Should there not be? Let's take that away and see before we go into. That should be. Okay, so I'm back again. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Gina. It says examine the code below and modify the variable so the output displays Carl's and Jennifer's information. I'm going to reset this. Let's reset everything. Okay. So it has, when we reset, we have this should be final allowance, of course, final double allowance, and we have an int, we have is old enough, system.out.print Gina's age is, because we're going to print what her age is, and she's going to be 16. And we're going to say, is she eligible for allowance? Okay, it has to say true or false, and it should be true. And then we should say what her weekly allowance is. So let's print this to see if this comes out. Maybe that should be there. Okay, let's see where we. Okay, so the final double allowance is 8.75 because it said that the allowance is always 8.75. Okay, so it printed Gina's age is, and this is from line 7. Gina's age is, remember it's going to print out what's in red. Okay, and it's going to go back and get the 16, so it's going to print her age within that. And because there is no LN right here, it's going to print Gina's age is 16 all on one line. So this will go all on one line. Then the next thing it's going to do is it's going to system print eligible for allowance. So we're going to print is she eligible or not for allowance, and it's true. So if she's eligible for allowance, we'll say what her weekly allowance is. So here, lines 11 and 12, we're asking, is she eligible for allowance? And this is what you see here, the output, eligible for allowance, true. And if so, then her output is Gina's weekly allowance is 8.75. So that's how that goes. Now the next thing that we need to do is it wants us to get that, print that same information for Carl. So we're going to do Carl first. Carl is 3 years younger than Gina, so that makes Carl 13. So here we need to type system, just like you did above, dot out, dot print, open parentheses, and we're going to say Carl's age is, space, and you leave that, make sure you put your semicolon. Then you have to say system dot out dot print LN, because we want it to go to another line, and we will say age. And this does not go in double quotes, okay? Next, we will say system dot out dot print, is he eligible? So we'll say eligible for allowance. Question mark, space, come over here and semicolon. And at the same time, we want to print out if he's eligible or not. So we'll say true or false. That should be LN. And we should say is old enough. Like that. Semicolon. Okay. And then lastly, we will say system.out.print. And we will say Carl weekly allowance is system.out.print LN, and here we will say allowance and like that. And my suggestion is to run it after each one. Let's run it. So we have an error here. First of all, I am missing, it says on line 16 an error, they're expecting a semicolon. So right here on line 16, I forgot to put a semicolon there for the output. Print Carl's age is, and then it says on allowance 20, line 20, it's saying they expect a semicolon, so I forgot to put one there. So let's put one there. And then those should be our two errors. Let's run it again. So we should have Gina's age is 16. She's eligible for allowance. Her allowance is 8.75. Carl's age is 13. Carl is 13. So here I forgot something. I need to put here, I need to say int, over here I need to say int, hold on, what am I doing? I need to say int age equals 13. You have to put that in there. And then you need to put in the Boolean is old enough equals. So if he's old enough to get an allowance, then you put true. So let's do this. Let's run it again. Now you should see that his age is 13. Let me see. Int age equals 13. Boolean is old enough equals true. So this is allowance Java on 16 equals 13. Error variable age is already defined in main. Int age equals 13. Okay, so I see the error because it has been declared. The int has been declared up here. So I don't need to declare it down here again. I just need to say age. And the Boolean has been declared up there, and I don't need to say Boolean here. I just need to say is old enough. Now let's run it. And now here we go. We have Gina is 16. She's she's eligible for allowance, and her allowance is age 75. Carl, age is 13. He's eligible for allowance, and his allowance is age 75. Now we're going to do this last one, which is for Jennifer, who is 3 years old. So here again, remember we would type age equals 3, semicolon. And then we'll say is old enough. And we're going to say what? False. Because she's what? She's under, up here it says, children under 8 do not receive an allowance. So she's 3, right? So we're going to say false. So here we're going to say system.out.print. We're going to say, what is her name again? Jennifer. We're going to say Jennifer. We're going to say Jennifer's age is. And it's easy to forget a semicolon, so just be conscious of that. Pay close attention to detail and what you are typing. And here you want to say age. Make sure that semicolon is outside of the close parentheses, and then you'll say system. And make sure there is no space. You see how I put a space there? You don't want to do that. Out.print. And so I'm looking above, so you can just look above and get some of that information. We'll say not eligible. Or we can say eligible. I'm going to say eligible for allowance, and it should come up false. And go system.out.print, and we'll say is old enough. And then we will say here system.out.print, and we will say Jennifer does not receive a weekly, something like this, allowance. Okay, then we go here and we go there, and then we should say system.out.print, and we should say you have to say allowance. And let's see what happens. Let's run it. So normally, oh, it worked. Okay, so it says here, it says Gina is 16. She's eligible for allowance. Her allowance is $875. It says Carl is 13. He's eligible for allowance. His allowance is $875. Jennifer's age is 3. Eligible for allowance. No, she's not. Jennifer does not receive a weekly allowance. And you could say a weekly allowance. You can say like that, and then it say and then it say 875. So grammatically it'll read better. Okay? So right here, allowance of 875. So